Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I've been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for OnSI every single day since August 2019. And we are here continuing to march forward to another phase of the offseason. As always, you can always find our 100% free 24/7 boots on the ground coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars when you follow us on social media such as Facebook and Twitter at Jaguars on SI. You can also follow us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I am here delivering you a continuation from yesterday's episode looking at our 53-man offseason roster projection for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yesterday, we looked at the offense. It was maybe light on some position groups. I believe we had, 6, 11, 14. We had 23 of the Jaguars' 53 players, there on offense. Obviously, 3 go on special teams, but there you go. It is a, pretty even, I'd say, list. That go ahead and leaves you with a little more on defense. I believe 4 more, but there's reasons for that. And it's just simply put, the Jaguars are deeper at some positions on defense right now than they are on offense. So after breaking down the offense and the guys that we have making the 53-man roster yesterday, we are now looking at the defensive side of the ball for the Jacksonville Jaguars. First position that we looked at, and again, this is not our final 53-man roster projection. That will come at the end of training camp, obviously, but this is just to give you a look where we see things after the conclusion of the offseason program. The first position group we'll look at is the defensive end group, the edge rushers. There's one guy in here you can maybe lump in with the linebackers. We'll see who he practices with. He's listed as a linebacker on the team roster, but we'll see. And we'll get to him. But we'll see ultimately who he ends up practicing with when healthy. But we kept 5 edge rushers / defensive ends. Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker are the obvious ones. One of the best pass rush duos in the entire NFL. Just an absolute massive number of sacks over the last 2 seasons. This is a group who, simply put, has looked like one that is going to anchor this entire defense. And by group, I mean these 2 guys. I mean, really, they're 2 of the best players on the roster, 2 of the best players on the entire team, especially 2 of the best players on the defense. In my opinion, they are their 2 best defenders. So 2 guys who will clearly make an impact for the Jaguars this year, 2 guys who they are clearly going to lean on in a lot of ways. Behind them, we have 3 offseason additions. It's kind of wild to think the Jaguars added 3 legitimate backup pass rushers this offseason after adding a complete total of 0. Well, Travis Gibson, we'll go with half of one in the last 2 off seasons combined. But those 3 we had all making the roster. It is Emmanuel Ogbah, it is Dewan Smoot, and it is Dennis Gardeck. Now, Emmanuel Ogbah, I expect him to be the number 3 edge. A lot of experience with Anthony Campanile. If you look at his production with the Miami Dolphins, when he was a backup, really good production, for a rotational edge. He was forced really into starter snaps last year due to all the injuries the Dolphins had at the position. And he just isn't really at that stage in his career. But as a number 3 edge, I think can be an effective player. Now, then you have Dewan Smoot, old familiar face in Jacksonville who they signed earlier this offseason after a year with the Buffalo Bills. He looked much better with the Buffalo Bills than he looked coming off that Achilles injury in his last year at the Jaguars in 23. So he's a guy who he provides inside-out value. He can rush as a defensive tackle on 3rd down. Just gives them some versatility, and he has experience with defensive line coach Matt Edwards. Dennis Gardeck, he's the one I mentioned. Maybe you can consider him a linebacker, as a Sam linebacker, but his primary job will be, to me, as a pass rush specialist on 3rd downs. Kind of give them that change of pace pass rusher. You guys remember the hundreds of episodes we had saying they should trade for Josh Uche, which didn't exactly look like those panned out. But nonetheless, we've been saying they need a pass rusher with a fastball who can just come flying off the edge like a banshee. Just considering, who they have in Trayvon Walker, who they have in Josh Allen. Somebody with different skill sets, always good. We'll see where he practices when he's healthy. He's coming off an ACL injury last year, but somebody whose game I'm a big fan of. And plus, he gives Camp that versatility as like an edge. You can kind of drop into those hook curl zones, drop into the flats, etc. Somebody who has a lot of talent. Defensive line, interior defensive line, we had them keeping 5 players: Eric Armstead, Devon Hamilton, Mason Smith, Jordan Jefferson, and Tyler Lacey. Pretty easy group to figure out. They didn't add anybody this offseason other than a couple undrafted free agents. They have a mix of veterans and a mix of young guys, second and third year players, to the point where I think it's an interesting enough room to where you have guys who I think you can kind of lean on as starters, guys you can lean on hoping maybe they'll develop. Mason Smith will set the tone for the ceiling of that room, however. If Mason Smith can take his end-of-year flashes and turn it into, sustainable, effective, and efficient play for the Jaguars along the interior defensive line, he will completely redefine the value and makeup of that room. Now, that's a lot of pressure for a second-year guy, but he has the traits. They didn't add anybody else, so he's obviously important. And then, we've talked about this really ad nauseum, but Eric Armstead being moved back inside, saw him play a ton of inside during the course of the offseason program. That's not to say I don't think he'll play any snaps on the edge. You'll probably see it in some formations now and then. He has the build and the length, to set the edge. But I do think that he will rush much more from inside as compared to outside, which was not the case last season. But when he did rush from inside compared to outside, his numbers are just dramatically different. So still, in my opinion, a lot of talent with him. Still looks like he's in really good shape. And this time he won't be coming, off an injury or anything like that. Linebacker, we had them keeping 6: Foye Oluokun, Devin Lloyd, Chad Muma, Ventrell Miller, Jack Kaiser, and Jalen McLeod. This would mean no Yasir Abdullah. I just see it as Yasir Abdullah and Jalen McLeod are the 2 guys that they seem to be teaching the Sam linebacker spot right now. I don't see the value in keeping both, honestly. It's just such a niche role. I'm probably screwing that up. Nonetheless, that I don't think you need more than 2 guys at it. And if I had to think which one they'll take, you see Abdullah from the last regime, who doesn't have a lot of NFL tape, doesn't have much NFL production, or the guy they drafted in the 6th round, who they appear, to be a fan of on and off the field. He's probably, the guy I'm leaning, Jalen McLeod. So not a lot of mystery otherwise at this group. I think they have some guys who are set up well for practice squad spots, but, you have a couple expiring contracts there, and Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma that will obviously have to be monitored moving forward. It could be a room that you see a decent amount of change in the future, but maybe not right away. At cornerback, I had them keeping 5, but really they have 6, adding Travis Hunter. But I had them with Tyson Campbell, Jordan Lewis, Monteric Brown, Jarian Jones, and DeAndre Prince. Prince, could be a guy that has to fight for his spot on the roster. But ultimately, this is a group who, to me, they've made it pretty clear who the top guys are. Tyson Campbell and Jordan Lewis are locked-in starters. Buster Brown's really impressed. Jarian Jones has a lot of talent, obviously, and I think it's clear that the coaching staff likes him. He's a very easy guy to like for a coaching staff because he works hard. He has a great energy about him. I've said it before. I think the Jaguars need 53 Jarian Joneses just for his passion for the game, his intensity, his toughness. To me, he's just a guy who has to see the field one way or another, and we'll see what that looks like. I have them keeping 6 safeties, and that's simply because I don't see them waiving many draft picks. So I had them keeping Eric Murray, Darnell Savage, Caleb Ransaw, Daniel Thomas, Andrew Wingard, and Rayon Lane. Now, I would see Darnell Savage and Murray as the starters in this group. Savage is, to me, pretty far and away their best playmaker of the group. Very dynamic athlete, very dynamic person off the field. So somebody who they should absolutely see, in my opinion, as a big piece of this defense this season. Otherwise, you have a high pick in Ransaw, who you have to think will see the field sooner than later. We'll see how much in year 1, just because he's getting moved to safety for the first time, after playing cornerback in college. But definitely a room that has a lot of depth and a lot of value to it. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. Please do not forget to find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all other podcast platforms and give us a like, subscribe, review, follow, whatever you got to do. And also make sure you follow us on YouTube at Sports Videos on SI.